And I was talking to some guys the other week who'd set up their business. And I said, where were you before? And they said, well, we were at EY. And I said, why did you leave EY? And they said, well, we realized the purpose of EY was to make the partners at EY more money. And that wasn't very motivating to us. So we left. And we set up our own business. And our purpose now is to create the autonomous IT project. And so they've gone from being in a business with no purpose to a really clear purpose and something that helps them attract great people. Because if you want to attract the best people you can afford, having a purpose really makes that possible. What I would like you to do is I would like you to think that you are at your own funeral. And somebody is reading your eulogy. And I'd like you to write down on a piece of paper just a couple of things that you would like them to say about you. And then when you've done that, I'd like you to share that with the person sitting next to you. Not the whole table, not the whole world, just write something down and share it with somebody sitting next to you. So at your funeral, somebody's reading your eulogy. What would you like them to say about you? Okay, and share that with somebody next to you. Okay, let me bring you back. Okay, hands up if anybody wrote, he worked lots, he never came home, he was in the office as much as he could be. No, nobody wrote that? Look, so I think if you're in business, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a manager, you've got a huge opportunity to create a purpose. Even if you create a purpose for your team, even if you can't create a purpose for the whole company, have a conversation with your staff. Find out what it is what legacy they want to leave, and then try and work out how you or your team can help each other create that legacy. That can be hugely powerful. There's a guy I interviewed on the podcast last week. He couldn't see how he could create a business purpose. So in the end, he came up with a family purpose. They decided in 2009 that in 2014, they were going to take 2 years off with their 3 young children and sail around the world. And so that made it possible for his family to put up with the fact that he was working 14 hours a day. And then they did it. And then they had a fantastic time. And I had a great chat with him and his wife last week on the podcast. That legacy thing is a piece of work that I do before I get clients to fill this in, which is a 1-page personal plan. And what you do is you start by trying to work out what your future looks like, and you work backwards, and then you say, for example, what relationships do I want to be important to me at the end of my life? And then maybe what should I do in the next 90 days? Stop, start, and continue so that those relationships are important to me now and remain important to me. So it's about being deliberate. This is about being deliberate. Often I say to people who play golf, who plays golf? You any better than you were 10 years ago?
Actually, yes.
Okay, anybody else? Are you? So listen, the thing is, lots of people I say that to, they say no. And it's because they play golf, but they don't practice. Right? There's no deliberate practice. And so That's why I love to hire people who've been athletes, because they've got up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Swimmers have got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, day after day after day. They know what grind looks like. And so that sort of deliberate practice, so that one-page strategic, one-page personal plan is really about trying to work out what's important to you at the end, and then working out what you should do now and forever so that you get there. Because without a plan, you don't get there. So Galileo, 402 years ago, he thought the world was flat, and he thought that the sun travelled around the Earth. And he got a telescope, and he looked at the moons of Jupiter, and he realised that it didn't. He took something that he observed, and he changed his entire view of the world, and fell out with the Catholic Church as a result, because he said that actually the sun was the centre of the universe and the Earth went round the sun. Copernican solar system. And this started the Age of Enlightenment, and for me this is the scientific method, if you like. So when you look at something, if you have research, you should do something with the research. This is the sign that's in the bathrooms upstairs, in the rooms here. I stayed here last night. You know, who has ever seen anybody step off a tube train and drop through the gap between the train and the platform? Have you ever seen anybody do that? And is it because they say mind the gap every single time you get off the train? Do you think that makes any difference? What a load of bollocks, right? And so this doesn't stop people using their towels either, right? No, but in Cialdini's book on influence, he says what you should do, the evidence says what you should do is you should say 70% of people who stay in our hotel reuse their towels. Who said we're pack animals? Somebody said that earlier today. Yeah. And so if you feel like you're in a pack, you will behave like the rest. So you have to use things like that. Yeah, anyway. So that's why I think this hotel is good but not great, because people don't sweat in the detail, right? So when I go in and go into businesses, I can go into reception and I just know. I feel the energy in the business about, is this an amazing business that's just on it or not? Uber. What score does an Uber driver have to get before HR are on his case? 4.5. Because they get 5 or 1. And if your score, you'd think about it, go maybe 2.5 because it's on a 5-point scale. But it's not. And so this is Jim Collins' flywheel. And so what he says is basically it's about, there are some fundamentals you've just got to be really deliberate about and grind them out and be on it all the time. And that's the difference between successful companies and unsuccessful companies. Why would you bother having an engaged workforce? This is some data from Best Companies. It just shows that the companies that were at least a star accredited outperformed the stock market. Great new book from Bruce Daisley. Here's what I see a lot inside organizations. People putting up with okay staff. The people do 60%, they don't get fired. What you have at stake is 40% of discretionary effort. And if you can get that day in, day out from all of your people, that compound interest, that compounding effect over time, every day you're getting 40% more from your people. The Best Companies data, Jonathan Austin said to me, engaged staff that they find work 30% longer hours for 5% less pay and are happier than disengaged. So you've just got this, you can get, it's the capitalist in me, you can get 30% voluntary effort or 40% voluntary effort from your staff for engagement. But I think you've got to be deliberate. So one of my things is diversity for the sake of diversity. So this was at Rackspace, and the flags above people's desks were to give some indication of where they were from or where they saw their affinity. And one year we'd had some people come in and they said, Dom, you've got no diversity. Everybody here is early 20s and white. So the least diverse workforce we've been in a long time. The year later they came back and they said, Dom, this is the most diverse workforce we've been in a long time. Because now you could actually see the diversity. So the people were still early 20s and white, but there was a massive diversity. We had 21 different nationalities speaking 17 different mother tongues out of the 150 people we had. I deliberately hired female salespeople. I never got a CV for a technical person from a woman. So the only way I could try and get a 50-50 gender balance was to deliberately hire ladies. So I know that's illegal, but otherwise I was just going to end up with another company of 97% men, and the only women were going to be in HR and marketing. So I deliberately went out and hired female graduates into sales. And that, we had a different dynamic as a result. So, great thing on the BBC. That's deer. I don't know, it doesn't come up really clearly, but they are red deer and they've got GPS tags on them. So the border here between Czechoslovakia and Bavaria, Iron Curtain, it started off as a fence and then ended up being electrified. And it went straight through the middle of a forest. And 30 years ago they took the border out because the Cold War ended. The deer don't cross the border still, 30 years later. They go up to where the border was and they go back. And this is amazing because the average life of a deer is 15 years. So there is no deer that has ever seen another deer electrocuted. And this is bureaucracy. This is the way we do things in our businesses. It's very limbic. It's like, it's not even rational. People don't even know that they're doing it. And so you've got to think about what is it that you do in your business every day and try and break through. One of the ways you can do that is to talk to new starters because they notice what's weird in your business. They don't notice it for long. As a student, I was in a student flat. It had a purple carpet and orange sofas and brown curtains, and that was a horrific combination. But after a few months, you stop noticing. So you've got that opportunity. So what I used to do is grab the new starters for a sandwich every month for the first 6 months and say, write down in a black book, what is it that you've noticed? What could we do differently? And that helps you get through some of that bureaucracy. I like military history. And I was just amazed to read this quote about, which to me sums up some of the things we've been talking about. And this was as they turned round in India and decided to go back into Burma and push the Japanese out of Burma and Singapore. And so he says the men must feel like they get a fair deal, equality. As far as possible, they must get the weapons to do the job, and the living conditions must be made as good as possible. So that's sort of, early 40s. In the jungles of Burma. And this is an example of a great office, I think. I built it. So what we did is we employed Henry's principle of pre-approved projects. And so I had a project team to help me build the office. In fact, I crowdsourced the whole design. There's some great blog posts of great office design. So I went out to the staff about 12 months before we moved and I said, snog, marry or dump. What do we like about the current space? What would we love in the new space? And what do we hate about the current space? Here's a blog. Go find amazing stuff. And the first designs had an indoor climbing wall, a herb garden in the kitchen. The budget didn't stretch to all of that. But we ended up converting a derelict pub and restaurant into 17,000 square foot of prime office space in Southampton on the docks.